Hey everybody, it's Sean, Bulle the Kid. This video is going to be about the worst paranormal or supernatural experience that I've ever witnessed myself. Um, there's only really three that I talk about. This one's the worst, and the other two, I don't know which one's the next worst, but I did a video on one of them, which was the owls. The incident with all the owls in the wilderness, that was really scary. And then the other one that occurred at our house, and I did a video on that too. So hopefully this is the last video I'm going to do on this subject because I don't like this. So some things just stick in your mind forever, especially when they're really unusual and traumatic. This is such a thing. This happened 21 years ago. It was back in 2004. We were living in Prescott Valley, Arizona, in a neighborhood called Coyote Springs. Now, Coyote Springs didn't have a lot of trees. It was made up of 10-acre parcels, so not every parcel had a house on it. In fact, probably only a third or a quarter of all 10-acre properties even had someone living on them. So we were spaced away from our neighbors quite a bit, and we had a fence going all the way around the 10 acres. And we would shut our gate at night, and nobody could come in or out. And nobody was out there anyway. We were just out there. It was almost like a prairie out there. And at the time, we had the four kids. Three of them were kind of small, and Shawnee was the oldest. And one day we started hearing like really weird noises at night. It was kind of like screaming, and it sounded kind of like a cat, but it was kind of worse. And so over the next couple days, I occasionally would be outside the house or outside the shed or the garage, and I would see this cat. Now, what struck me about this cat was when I first saw it, I had to take a double take because, like, that doesn't look like a cat. It was a cat, but it had almost like a human face on it. And when it looked at you, it was just like a person noticing you in a crowd and just looking at you. It didn't have cat eyes. It had almost human eyes. And that was the main thing, is when you looked at it and it looked back at you, that was really bizarre. And so I told Michelle that there's a really weird cat outside.
So I've been around cats all my life, and this cat was really different. It was really creepy. It had bright yellow eyes. It would just look at you almost like it was human. And even the meow was not a normal meow. It was just this really loud, strange howl that just kind of gave you the chills. It was not a normal cat. Um, I only saw it 3 or 4 times, but yeah, it creeped me out. It looked like it was looking at you like with a human face.
So we ended up seeing the cat off and on, and then at night we just kept hearing the screams and all this ruckus and commotion. And I always kind of chalked that up to cats outside fighting or something, but this was the worst noise I probably had ever heard a cat make. And it got really disruptive because it was this noise was happening, and our little kids were waking up, and we were all waking up. And so I had to do something about it. And so I took my live catch trap. I was going to try to remove this thing. And so I set the trap, And the first night, nothing happened. And then we still heard the howling and everything outside, like the screaming. And then the second night, um, I didn't notice anything. I went out at dusk and nothing was in the trap. And then a little bit later, I went out to check and I heard the trap pounding. It's a metal trap and it just was clanking and just like it was a lot of violence in there. And so I went inside the house and got my oldest boy, Shawnee, and we went outside. I got a pair of welding gloves because that's what I would wear to pick up the trap. When I went out and actually approached this thing in the trap, it was really disturbing. I have trapped cats before to get them fixed and things like that, and this thing it was just really weird. Very violent, just staring at me like, just like I don't know how to describe it. I don't know what kind of cat would go, but that's what it did. And so I carried the trap and it was really hard. And Shawnee was with me because he was holding a flashlight and it was total dark. And we went over probably about 20 feet away, kind of towards our vehicles. And I'm not going to say exactly what happened because this is really super disturbing for video. But me and the cat went to war physically. And then all at once, the two cars we had a Nissan Sentra, which did not have a car alarm. It just had a panic button. And then we had a Dodge Caravan, and that had a car alarm. But just when I went to war with that cat, something came out of it, and them car alarms simultaneously went off. And we were in total darkness, and then all of a sudden, both of our cars were going blah, 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 right at me and Shawnee. And they did it simultaneously. That was really super disturbing. I'd never could imagine something like that would happen. We live in an area where there's just no people nearby. And, like I said, it was two different brands of cars. One was a Nissan and one was a Dodge. And even the Nissan was going off like it had a car alarm. And of course, we lived out where we didn't even lock our cars because we had this big 10-acre fenced in property and the gate was closed, and we pull in. You don't have to bother locking your cars because nobody would really dare mess with your stuff out there. So we never did lock our cars. We never did set alarms or anything. But for some reason, when I went round and round with that cat, something left it, and it set the car alarms off. And I was really mad at first at Michelle because I thought that's a really terrible thing to do, is push those buttons. But she was not the joking kind. She never was. She never was a prankster. She was always just a pretty stable person, but I knew there had to be an explanation. So I went inside really angrily and said, "Why did you do that?" And she was kneeling down by the bathtub, and she wondered what the ruckus was about, and I I asked her why she did that, and she said she didn't do that. She's been taking care of the kids. And then I look on the wall, and there's our key fobs hanging on the wall, and they're higher than our kids can reach.
So that night, I was getting the 3 little kids ready for their bath. So we were in the bathroom, and I was kneeling down at the tub, and I heard the car alarms go off, and I wasn't quite sure what was going on because I was busy with the kids. And then all of a sudden, Sean comes in and was wondering why I pressed the car alarm buttons, but I didn't know what he was talking about really because I was just in the bathroom helping the kids. And the key fobs were on the key rack.
It really disturbed me because it was seemed like a demon possessed cat. And then when I went round and round with it, and it set the car alarms off from a distance. And when I say a distance, it was probably about 20 feet, maybe 30 feet. And it really was awful, and thing was evil. And so the next day, I couldn't hardly sleep that night. That was so terrible. And so next day I went over to a neighbor. He was about 10 acres away. He was our closest neighbor. I went over to Chuck and told him what happened, and I just said, this is really terrible way to have evidence of the spiritual world, to have something like this happen.
Well, even though it's been something over 20 years, I'm sure, I have a reasonably distinct memory of Sean coming over the fence, since he was my next door neighbor, and wanting to talk to me when I was working in my shop about the cat story. Initially, I thought he was just telling me kind of a amusing, freaky little story, but it became pretty quickly obvious that he was rather disturbed. Well, and I'll tell you, the thing about both of the car alarms going off simultaneously, particularly when one of them wasn't even really a car alarm, is admittedly a pretty darn freaky thing.
So that affected us for years. I think it affected my son really bad because he witnessed something really awful where this thing seemed to have a spirit in it, and it came out. And so he ended up going and over to Afghanistan, and he was in that awful war. And he came back, and we were sitting out here just chatting about stuff, and I don't know why I brought that up to him. I said, "Do you remember that cat?" And of course, he had been to war and seen some really terrible things. And he looked at me and he said, I'd really rather not think about that. That was really, really terrible." And so he didn't like that at all. He remembered it even though he went to war. So anyway, I would have rather not had that happen. I don't know why whatever that was chose our house back then. It was just a short incident. Anyway, thought I'd get that out there because when you witness stuff like that, I think you'd rather see nice miracles and really nice, happy things. But when you see really evil things in person that defy science, it kind of messes with your head. And anyway, I've gotten over it, but it's one of those things that I didn't know if any of you guys watching have ever had something like that happen where something possessed an animal I would say I give cats a lot of leeway. I love cats. I've had cats all my life. I have a few here, and never seen anything like that thing, because that thing, it just wasn't cat-like. It was like a person was occupying a cat. It was very weird. So yeah, let me know what you guys think. Like I said, I don't want to describe the battle I had with that thing, because it was really terrible. And poor Shawnee had to, I mean, I don't know what it's like to be a kid and you're actually in a horror show. Like, what is that like? So, as some of you guys know, Shawnee didn't survive the war in Afghanistan. He came home and he couldn't survive it, and so he is gone now. And otherwise, I might have tried to talk him into at least telling you guys from his point of view what happened that night, but I don't think he would have wanted to do it. It was really bad. And I suppose as a kid that was really traumatic. To see something that's not acting like the physical world should act. So anyway, that's it. Got that story out of the way. A lot of my other stories are going to be a lot happier than that. But at least I don't have to cover this now. So that's it. Catch you later.
Bulle, the kid.